All right, as you're finishing up your composition, I'm just getting a few things here. I have a cotton ball for my lift technique. However, you can use a rag, a paper towel, anything that is kind of fibrous and can pick up liquid. So it does not have to specifically be a cotton ball. It can even be a rag at that point. If you want to add some flowers, like right here, you can, using some crayons or oil pastels. I'm just going to add a few dots of yellow for some dandelions in the field. So I'm going to do that. And maybe a few dots of red because it just sounds cool. However, if you don't want to do that, that's okay too. But this is going to make it super easy for us to sweep from one side to the other without having to worry about painting in between these finer details. So, I also want to encourage using tape. For me, I have the really sticky super hold tape. I do not recommend using this. My last class, I actually accidentally tore some of my paper off of my composition. So if you have super sticky tape, you're going to want to press it to your clothing to kind of get some of that stickiness off. It will suck up some of the fibers of your clothes to help prevent it from sticking too much to your paper. You can use whatever tape you feel comfortable. Masking tape probably would work the best. Masking tape is like a yellowish kind of tape. It's not super clear. It's kind of, you can't really see through it very well. I'm creating a straight line all the way across my paper, and I encourage you to do this before putting down your wash, because last class I put my wash down and the tape ate my paper. And the class before, I actually experimented and put it down before I put my wash down, and it did not eat my paper. So, fun tidbit for the day. Now, this is going to be your fence. We're going to quick put in our fence first. Before we even consider doing anything with washes. Because we want our paper to be as sturdy as possible for this. It's a good thing I wore my sweater today. Lately, it's just been so darn cold. Okay, so you get to decide what color you want your fence. Heck, if you want like a pink fence, that's fine. If you want a brown fence, go for it. Or even a tan fence, your choice. But what you are going to want to do is you are going to want a decent amount of paint. So I'm going to spend a minute here collecting paint. I put a drop of water on my paintbrush, and you almost want that paint to turn your paintbrush a different color. You can see how this is brown. And see, if you paint all the way down here, it's not going to end up on your paper. I would avoid, if you have this fence going through and behind your sheep, I would stop at the sheep, jump over it, and then paint to the other side or add paint to the other side. Same thing with your tree trunk. If you have some of that here. Now I'm using a super dark brown because I plan on making my tree trunk a lighter brown, so that way my tree trunk separates from my what do you call it? My paint post, or my brown paint for my fence. And very, very slowly pull this tape up. Very slowly. And you should have a nice, straight, brown plank all the way across your paper behind that sheep of yours as something to use as a guide for your fence. See, mine's starting to pull paper up. If yours is starting to pull paper up, switch your pulling method where you're pulling down and then up very slowly. This kind of alternates the pressure of the tape to loosen up on the surface of your paper without tearing the fiber of your paper. So just keep that in mind. Pull at a slant. Yeah, mine's super sticky. You might not have that issue, but with mine, if you have super sticky tape or clear tape. But you can see now, I literally have a fence plank. I call it a fence plank because we're going to start putting in the posts. Posts are pretty easy. They're going to be a straight up and down stroke of paint. But I don't know about you, whenever I try to draw a straight line all the way across the paper, I always somehow it ends up crooked or tilted. So this technique here helps eliminate that and ensure that I get a nice straight line. You might have to paint behind or make small little shapes coming up from your sheep's head to indicate that you have a post there, depending on how far apart your posts are placed. You don't have to have them as close as I do, but since I have them closer, one's supposed to appear right above my sheep's head, so I got to put it in there, unfortunately. And this one's actually behind my tree, so I won't worry about that. So while we're finishing up our fence, I'm going to chit-chat a little bit about that drag and pull technique. It's really going to help with your sheep and your tree. A drag and pull technique is basically using a pretty dry on dry technique. So you have a little drop of water on your paintbrush, and then you have lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of paint. And you literally use this to outline your shapes to create like a really bold effect, to kind of make your tree trunk pop. Same thing with your sheep. So I'm just going to start outlining this to kind of show you what I mean here. You don't want a really wet brush. You just want like a damp brush, kind of like a towel dry damp brush. and you can use the bristles of your brush kind of like a pencil or pencil lead to just outline the shape. If you have a rounded tip, you can use that too. Just do not apply too much pressure when doing this because you don't want too thick of a line on your outline. You just want enough to give you that crisp, bold edge. And I am actually going to do this with the brown. See how I outlined it? Damp brush, not super wet, lots of paint. Small brushes are okay. You just want to outline this with a damp brush. Lots and lots of paint. Any brush will do. If you have a pointed brush, don't put lots of pressure in your hand. I'm going to clean out my brush, and I'm going to do the filler part of my tree by squeezing out all the extra water. And I'm literally taking the edge of my bold line here that I've just put on the paper, and I'm smearing some of that color inside the body of the tree. That's why we call it the drag and pull technique. You're literally dragging watercolor and you're pulling it across the shape to fill it in. And that is why I also call that filler shade, because you're filling in a shape with a swatch of color. For step 2, you want a damp, clean brush. Same dampness as step 1, but you want it clean because you're trying to kind of create a lighter filler shade on the inside, so your thick lines of paint will still pop on the outside. If you don't clean your brush, then they'll be the same color and you won't have that pop I was talking about. So just keep that in mind. It's all preferential. If you don't want the pop and you want it all to be the same color, then go for it. Now, if you feel like your fence posts might be a little too long or too large and they almost look like they're more in front of your big tree than in back, you could always choose to add a stroke of brown right here in the front where your trunk is to kind of make it look like that tree has moved back into space and the fence has come forward. If you don't like the results, you can always scoop up that extra brown and spread it somewhere else on your paper. But start light and see if you like it. If you don't like it, you can always fix it as long as you start light. If you like the way it looks, then add more paint to kind of bolden up that post to fix that area. This is all preferential. If you want it to look like the tree is closer, leave it alone. If you want to make the tree look like it's backwards into space, then add that post. We call that overlapping. To create a sense of space, we use like overlapping skill.